My name is Susan Golubach, and I'm going to be talking about the neurological differences in the autistic brain, which I feel is very important to helping autistic adults understand how they can use this information to advocate for what they need and for the non-autistic to better support them. In this particular episode, and there will be a number of them, I'm going to be talking about the impact of brain differences on development. It's obvious that a brain that functions differently is going to develop differently. So let's take a look at it according to the latest research theory. The impact of brain differences on the development of social connectedness and later social emotional regulation and self-determination is one of the more recent theories being proposed for why the autistic brain develops differently. The resource is listed below. The theory goes that infants develop a social awareness when they interact with their caregivers. Particularly if they enjoy the experiences, it becomes a bond, an interaction they seek to do more of. They also develop their own self-awareness when they suck on their toes and fingers and put their hands out to objects they see and come into contact with it and realize that they have some control over things that happen in their environment. So they become aware of their own self. This will lead to a sense of connection between self and others. You begin to see there's a related purpose. There's a sense of belonging to each other. Infants will start to mimic adults. They begin to realize they have the ability to do what they see other people do, and they're going to explore it because it seems like fun. This leads to, according to the theory, a sense of self-control. Because imagine the child that sees those cookies and says, "Oh, I am desperately in need of one of those cookies." But then their brain shifts from thinking just of their own needs to others. Uh-oh, am I going to get in trouble with someone who's important to me, like my mom, if I take them, or my siblings, if I have one and they don't? A sense of connectedness also leads to a sense of self-determination, i.e., you develop a sense of yourself, what you can do, that you do have powers, but you're also aware of how others perceive you. And that requires a sense of social connectedness, to really feel I have control, but within the bounds of what others will allow and I can control. What happens when the autistic brain does not experience that bonding, that connection to the caregivers, because the sensory experiences that they experience are not necessarily pleasant? They don't want to be hugged and cuddled. The sounds of their voices seem like boomingly loud and very uncomfortable. So their interaction is not a pleasurable one. And what about self-awareness? One of the latest theories on interoception, or awareness of self, the inner workings from your muscles and joints and your internal organs, appears to be undersensitive or oversensitive, but out of balance in the autistic individual. So they're not developing, or they don't start off with a very strong social awareness or an awareness of self. So what does that do to their sense of connection with other people and having a related purpose with them and a sense of belonging? It definitely can interfere with development of social connectedness. How does that impact on self-control? Well, they may either only be aware of my need at that moment, I want that cookie, and we don't shift thinking of the impact that it may have on us from other people, or we are so overwhelmed by a sense of other that we struggle with how do I meet that need of myself and others, which is involved in self-control. Self-determination. We may become way over self-determined and not rely on others to help us out, or we may become so other-focused that we don't develop a sense of self-determination. Let's look at this more in depth. This is how what I have observed in myself and in the individuals that I've worked with, how autistics attempt to compensate for these imbalances or difficulties in developing social connectedness. They either tend to become very self-focused, i.e., my way makes sense to me and it's who I know myself to be, so this is what I focus on, is myself. You may also think others don't understand or accept me, and they often try to control or take advantage of me, so I have to fight for that self that I know myself to be, i.e., becoming very overly self-focused, or we may become totally other-focused. Now, my younger sister became very self-focused, and it's like, if you don't like the way I am, I have no room in my life for you. I became very other-focused. I wanted to fit in, so just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And that way, when you're done, I can be myself when I'm by myself. But when I'm with others, I felt the need to be totally other-focused. I see myself in others who appear to be helpless, and I had developed a strong sense of other awareness and wanted them to feel better about themselves. But in the process, I never developed a sense of self until I discovered autism. Autistics can struggle to actually focus on both at the same time, or we can shift between the two. We can sometimes be so self-focused and unaware of others, or so other-focused that we're unaware of our own needs, but we can't seem to do both at the same time. Let's ask yourself the question about how socially connected do you feel to other people? And I'll tell you right now, the higher your score, the more likely you feel socially disconnected. Answer these questions. Do you have people in your life that you seek to spend time with on a regular basis? How many? Do you share a common interest or passion with the people that you interact with? How many? How many people do you mimic what they say or do because you admire them and you want to be like them? How many people have helped you to learn something that you really wanted to learn? Not what they said you should learn, but something you really wanted. How many people do you feel know and accept you for the person you know yourself to be? Interesting questions to consider. Now, let's ask yourself, does your oversensitivity interfere with your interactions with others? And again, the higher the total score, the more likely your sensitivities are affecting your interactions with other people. So, are you comfortable with being touched or others being close to you? Are there certain voice tones or sounds that people make that you find really irritating? Are there certain fragrances that people wear that make you feel ill? Do you feel that most people say too much, talk too fast, making it hard to understand what they're saying? And you're scoring yourself on never through always. Do you feel that most people move too fast when showing you something, making it hard to follow what they're doing when you're trying to watch them? Now, let's look at the opposite. Do you tend to be undersensitive, and does that impact on your interactions with others? And again, the higher the score, the more likely your undersensitivities are affecting your interactions with other people. Do you frequently seek or allow hugs or touch from other people, or touch them longer than they seem comfortable with, i.e., you're seeking touch and hugs? Do others seem to back away when you stand or sit next to them, or otherwise indicate you are too close? Do you have an awareness of other people's personal space? Do others ask you to slow down or talk more quietly? Are you aware of your own voice speed and tone? Do others seem to withdraw or seem uncomfortable when you reach to touch or show them something? Are you invading their space? Do you ever walk between two people who are talking or interrupt them to say something you feel is important? Again, all of these indicate that you may be undersensitive to the sensitivities of other people and what they expect, and you're not giving it. And so that's going to impact on how they feel about you. Let's consider these over-under sensitivities. Is your oversensitivity causing you to become so super aware of your environment and social situations in order to protect yourself from any discomfort that you have trouble relaxing and paying attention to your surroundings or what other people are saying or doing? I know I do. Is your undersensitivity to the environment around you and the people in it resulting in you unintentionally ignoring one or the other, resulting in things happening that you didn't perceive happening or expect to happen, or people becoming upset with you because of something you failed to do or see? Keep in mind, you may fluctuate between being overly sensitive and undersensitive. This kind of inconsistency, according to research, can be very common in autistic individuals. If so, you may want to think about working with an occupational therapist to help you rebalance your sensitivity levels. Some heightened or decreased sensitivities can be related to dietary imbalances as well. And that can lead to a chemical imbalance in the brain, since the gut feeds the brain. So you end up too stimulated or too inhibited. A nutritionist or a naturopathic doctor familiar with autism might be able to help you achieve a better balance. All right, now let's look at your awareness of your own body. Are you overly aware of the internal workings of your body? And again, the higher the score, the more likely your over-awareness affects your interactions with others. So, are you aware of your muscles feeling tired, tight, unsteady when you walk? I am constantly aware of my muscles and how they feel and respond whenever I'm walking. Are you sensitive to how clothes feel on your body? Tight, scratchy, cold. I can't stand blue jeans for the reason they have seams in them and the material isn't flexible enough. Do you frequently feel hungry, thirsty, or seek food or something to drink throughout the day? Do you frequently feel the urge to urinate or defecate, or have random pains in some part of your body during the day or at night? Are you aware of your heart beating fast or irregular or changes in your rate of breathing? If you are, you're obviously overly aware of the inner workings of your body. Now ask yourself, do you tend to ever be underaware of the inner workings of your body? For example, do you unexpectedly fall or trip even though you don't feel you're off balance? Do you set objects down or close doors too hard even though you intend to or don't intend to? Meaning that you're not aware of the amount of effort you put into your muscles. So you do it too hard. Do you have near accidents because you waited too long to urinate or defecate? Do you become exhausted because you didn't feel the need to rest or hydrate, i.e., you're driving yourself so badly that next thing you know, I'm just totally exhausted and you didn't feel it coming on? Does it seem to require effort to coordinate your actions? Fine motor, gross motor, speech, chewing, swallowing? Oh, I definitely have a hard time with coordinating chewing and swallowing when eating. So, if so, does this awareness or lack of awareness with your own body impact on how you interact with other people? Consider, does your over awareness of what's happening inside your body make you focus so much on these sensations or the sources of discomfort that your ability to focus on others and how and what they may be feeling is diminished? Does your under awareness of input from your body result in you being accident prone or even unaware when you might be hurt or in danger? Since your body doesn't seem to complain much, do you tend to take on too much, not ask for help when you probably should, or not recognize when you're on the verge of collapse or ill enough to see a doctor? And again, do you fluctuate? Do you see some of this in you at times and the other side at other times? This kind of inconsistency, according to research, is very common in autistic individuals. So you may want to think about working with an occupational, physical, or speech therapist to either heighten or decrease your awareness of the messages your body is sending you so that you're more able to focus on the world and the people around you. Now, let's talk about exercising self-control. Are you able to control your impulses, your emotions, and desires? Think about how often are you able to stop yourself from doing, saying something because you know it's not the right thing to do or say under those circumstances with that particular person? How often can you quickly calm yourself down once you get upset? How often can you quickly control your emotional reaction when something happens that you don't expect or want? How often are you able to wait to get what you want when it takes time or effort? How long do you persist in working towards something you want without giving up? The higher the score, the more likely your inability to self-control affects your interactions with other people. Now, let's look at the opposite. How much do others influence your development of self-control? Do you stop yourself from doing, saying something out of fear that others will judge you? Meaning you're very focused on them and what they may think that prompts you to control your actions. How often do you stop yourself from getting emotional because you know there will be consequences if you don't? How often do you rely on others to tell you what to say or do so you don't get into trouble? How often does what others advise you to say or do conflict with what you feel is the right thing to say or do? And lastly, how often do you get angry at others for telling you what you should do or say, suggesting that there's definitely a conflict between what you perceive others expect and want from you and the self that you're kind of aware of, that your gut says, but no, I don't agree with them. So consider, do you struggle to stop yourself from impulsively doing or saying things you don't mean to do or say to the point that people become uncomfortable around you or avoid you? So if it's really, really hard to control yourself, people are going to feel uncomfortable. But are you so dependent on other people telling you that what you say or do that you often freeze if you're pushed to decide for yourself what you want to do? That conflict comes into play. Do you constantly worry about or second guess what others might think about what you say or do if you don't have someone tell you the right thing to say or do? Does your anxiety make people concerned about you or maybe even avoid you because your anxiety is so great and you're not able to make decisions for yourself? Or do you fluctuate? between knowing how, but having difficulty controlling your responses and depending on others to tell you what to do to regain or stay in control. This kind of inconsistency can be very common in autistic individuals. If so, if you see yourself one extreme or the other, or fluctuating between the two, you may want to think about working with a psychiatrist, psychologist, counselor, mentor, or coach that understands autism and can prescribe either medication, use cognitive behavioral therapy, work on executive functioning skills, teach you to meditate, or other strategies to help you feel more in control of your life, without which you're likely to experience depression and or burnout. So this is a really important area that you want to find that middle ground, that homeostasis between the extremes and constantly shifting between them. Now, let's look at self-determination. How determined are you to be in control of your own life? And not just a matter of how determined are you, but how able are you to be in control of your own life? Now, the higher you score here, the more you are determined to be and know how to be in control of your own life. So ask yourself the question, self-determination is built on autonomy, competence, and relatedness. And all three are very important. You not only have to feel yourself as yourself and the sole determination of what you do about yourself, you have to feel you have the ability, competence to do what you want to do. And it has to also be that element of relatedness to others in your environment. You don't have the ability to do anything you want to do, regardless of other people or the situation you find yourself in. So keep that in mind when you're judging just how self-determined you really are. Do you set goals for yourself and then set out to achieve them without help if needed? Do you feel that you're strong enough to overcome your anxieties and face your fears of failure to get what you want in life? Do you look for alternatives when problems occur? Then keep making choices until you find one that works? How persistent are you? Do you seek help and know how to find someone who really can help when needed? Because just asking anybody isn't necessarily going to get the help you want. You have to be able to determine what advice people give you is going to be helpful to you. So you have to know yourself. Do you understand what your strengths and limitations are? Can you articulate them to other people? Meaning, how well do you really know yourself? Let's ask the opposite. How much do other people influence your determination to be in control of your own life? Let's ask yourself these questions. Do you follow the lead of what you see others do to decide what you should do? So you're just watching other people and say, oh, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do that, whether it's relevant to you or not. Do you feel that you're not as competent as others and need to rely on their advice to solve problems in your life? Do you feel that you often have very limited or no options or choices when problems occur? Do you avoid seeking advice from others because they don't understand you, so the advice they give you is not helpful? Do you tend to reflect what others say about you into how you actually feel about yourself, i.e., you're taking their judgments as characteristic of yourself? So you're using their judgments to judge yourself. Again, the higher the score, the more likely you are allowing others to determine and direct the events in your life. So consider, between these extremes, are you so strongly independent of others that you insist on finding your own answers to problems, do not trust others to be of help in any way, or at least in the way you feel you need them to be, even though you may offer help or advice to others, doesn't mean you necessarily trust and get help from other people. Or the opposite. Are you so dependent on other people that you're afraid to make decisions by yourself? You want to seek their advice as often as possible. You mimic what you see others say and do, or you become anxious if others aren't able or willing to give you the answers you seek. I was that way. I would constantly ask. And finally, my sisters got to the point where they said, "You figure it out." I was so angry because now they forced me, but it was the best thing they could have done. Forced me to be self-dependent. Or do you fluctuate between these two extremes where you rely on yourself and other times you depend totally on other people to solve your problems? This inconsistency is very common in autistic kids. Sorry, someone managed to walk by and my dogs noticed. So if you fluctuate between these two extremes or stuck in one of these extremes, you may want to think about working with a psychologist, counselor, mentor, or coach that understands autism and can use cognitive behavioral therapy and or work on executive functioning skills to help you learn to problem solve with others. It's called interdependency. We are not dependent totally on them. You're not dependent totally on yourself. You share. There's an interdependency on each other while you're making decisions and accepting responsibility for those decisions yourself. I.e., you may get advice from other people, but you still are responsible for making that decision. They should not make it for you, and you should accept responsibility for that decision that you make. Occupational and speech therapists can also help work on executive functioning skills as well as self-advocacy skills, which may be very important to you. So, in summary, what autistics can do to advocate for themselves with what they now know about themselves. My advice is be bluntly honest about who you know yourself to be, your strengths and limitations. Just don't be bluntly honest what you perceive about other people. Again, blunt honesty works for yourself. It's not necessarily welcomed by other people. Seek out the strengths you perceive in others to help with your limitations when offered, and then you can offer to use your strength to help them. That's part of the interdependency that we're trying to achieve. Rely on your gut feelings. You may not know all the answers, but your gut will often tell you when something doesn't feel right, even though you may not know why it's not right, or the advice they give you just doesn't feel right for you. Rely on it. You do have intact gut feelings. When problems occur, ask several other people. Don't always rely on one. And then compare. You're sort of fact-checking among people to find out, because a lot of what they say is, this is true, is really just an opinion. It's their perspective. So you do want to shop around for advice. Ask them what choices they have or consider under this circumstance, not what solution they come up with, but what do they see as their choices? Because that's what you want to do. You want to know all of your options so that then you can choose the choice that's right for you or that makes sense for you. Don't blame yourself as deficient because you don't know or can't seem to do what others do. They aren't perfect either, but they won't admit it. I always thought typical people, I put them on a pedestal. They know everything. They do everything so easily. But I have learned life isn't that easy for them as they make it out to be. And they absolutely will not tell you if they don't do something well. In fact, they may even try to hide it. So don't think of yourself as less human than they are. Accept your differences. Don't blame them. Share with others who you know yourself to be as a person. And then later, you can say, it's because I'm autistic if you want to. But you're entitled to simply be an individual. You can say, oh, yeah, I have this sensitivity. It just really bugs me. But you don't have to say it's because I'm autistic. When you know a person well enough, you may want to share the details of being autistic and how that changes your perception. But that doesn't need to be the first thing you announce. You're entitled to be a person first and simply say, as a person, I have sensitivities. As a person, I have difficulties with this particular area, or I have a strength in this particular area. Talk to other people about yourself as a person first. Another summary: what others can do to support autistics to experience a sense of social connectedness. This advice is for non-autistics. The key to helping autistics develop a sense of social connectedness is to attempt to see life from their perspective. It's called perspective taking. They have always wanted autistics to see their perspective. But how can we see their perspective if they don't make an attempt to see things from our perspective? Perspective taking is two ways, just like communication. Non-autistics, let them know when you feel understood, you will have a greater interest in understanding them and seeing life from their perspective. But if we've never experienced someone taking an interest in what life is like from our perspective, how do we know what it feels like? Therefore, how would we want to? And that's the biggest problem, is we don't seem to want to take an interest in other people's perspective. And if they want us to see things from their perspective, they have to take the initiative and let us know how good it feels to feel understood, or at least even attempted to understand. Advocate for what you need, i.e., I need you to understand and see my perspective. Engage in turn taking. When you're doing or talking about things, make sure that you are aware of not only self, but also the other person, and that you don't get too wrapped up in only self without reflecting on others, or too wrapped up in others, which I made the mistake of doing, of simply letting them do all the talking. And I never got to share anything about myself. Establish limits if you need to make sure that these turns are equal. Avoid giving advice from your perspective, but instead work together to problem solve and explore options. Then let the autistic decide for themselves what's likely to work, as well as discover for themselves what doesn't work. Typical people are much too quick to give answers, solution, advice that they've come up with that worked for them. And really what you need are the options that they considered before they made their decision, so that you can make your decision from your perspective. This is advice I would give to non-autistics to help autistics develop this sense of social connectedness. Thank you for listening. Take care.